Welcome to this e-learning course on FIRE, a framework for integrating rights and equality into disaster risk reduction and climate resilience. This module focuses on non-discrimination. There are two learning outcomes for this module on non-discrimination. Having completed this module, participants will be able to 1. Identify basic principles of non-discrimination, and 2. Recognize how non-discrimination relates to issues relating to disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptation. In the language of the Sustainable Development Goals, non-discrimination is about leaving no one behind. All humans, irrespective of their gender, age, ethnicity, ability, religion, political opinion, or other characteristic, are entitled to enjoy the right to life with dignity. Discrimination is prohibited under international law, and in many countries under national law, but it unfortunately remains a widespread practice. Discrimination operates in different ways. Most familiar is the practice of direct discrimination. Direct discrimination occurs, for instance, when women are not permitted to participate in decision-making structures or are prohibited from owning property. Social norms that limit people of certain ethnicities, religions, or caste groups to certain livelihood activities are directly discriminatory. Exclusion of persons with disabilities from evacuation centers is also directly discriminatory. States must eradicate discrimination from laws and policies, but are also required to combat discrimination through accountability measures for public officials and through advocacy campaigns targeting discriminatory social norms. Discrimination can also be indirect and may not even be intentional. Indirect discrimination happens when, for instance, a newly constructed evacuation shelter is not accessible to persons with disabilities. Land use planning processes can be indirectly discriminatory, for instance, when planning meetings take place at a time and place when most women are unable to attend. Tackling indirect discrimination requires awareness-raising campaigns. The commitment to leaving no one behind requires all stakeholders to consider how their actions may exclude or marginalize people with certain characteristics, and to develop in ways of enhancing inclusion. The non-discrimination dimension of the FIRE framework connects to all of the other dimensions. Considering direct and indirect discrimination in relation to participation and access to information highlights issues around barriers to participation and the format and methods of communication of information. Governance systems and structures need to be analyzed and improved where direct or indirect discrimination is identified. Everyone is entitled to enjoy fundamental rights and equality, but there are many barriers that make it more difficult for some people to equally enjoy rights to shelter, to food, and to health. An integrated human rights and gender equality approach requires authorities and other stakeholders to address the factors that interfere with the enjoyment of fundamental rights and equality, including by taking action to address discrimination. As already noted, discriminatory social norms and social structures prevent certain people from enjoying a dignified life and must be addressed in the context of disaster risk reduction, but also far more widely. Finally, strengthening the agency of individuals who face discrimination empowers them individually and through partnership with others to address discrimination. Discrimination is a major contributor to differential exposure and vulnerability to disaster risk. Building resilience means overcoming discrimination in law, policy, and practice. In order to achieve this aim, international law requires state actors to pay particular attention to people whose vulnerability is connected to different forms of discrimination. In order to promote the right to equality, states may, for instance, require that decision-making bodies include a certain percentage of women, persons with disabilities, members of minority ethnic groups, and so on. They may allocate resources specifically targeting marginalized groups. Taking steps to promote the enjoyment of rights by people who have been marginalized does not amount to discrimination.